I had the opportunity to go to Kenya last year. This was my first time to Africa and first time seeing the mission that I was going to be a part of. We arrived in the evening, and the next morning I woke up to the sound of children playing and singing. I had the chance to be part of a worship and prayer time as the school day started. We sang and played with the kids, and then around 10 o'clock, the kids all ran to the kitchen to get breakfast. I asked them why they served breakfast so late, and the staff told me that many of the kids hadn't eaten anything since they had left school the day before. And in that part of Kenya, the ground is too hard, and there isn't enough water, and the locusts come through and kill off everything. Without the mission, Sagara mission, many of these children would simply have no food to eat. Today's story comes to us when things have taken a remarkable turn, and Joseph finds himself in charge of the food and livestock of all of Egypt. He correctly predicted that 7 years of bounty and then 7 years of famine. And the famine had gotten so bad that Israel and his family were suffering as well. So Israel sent his 10 brothers, not Benjamin, to buy grain from Egypt. And after Joseph messes with them a little bit, he finally breaks down and tells them the truth. So our story picks up in Genesis 45, 1 through 7. Take some time and read that now. So Joseph has gone through some tough times. If you didn't read between last and this week, Joseph, after he leads Potiphar's household, gets wrongly accused and finds himself in jail. Then he has a chance to interpret dreams and eventually was used by God to warn Egypt of the coming disaster. But God has perfectly put him in a position to save his family, the family that sold him into slavery in the first place. This is something very significant that we can learn about this story, that God can use the worst of circumstances to accomplish his purposes. You know, Joseph had every right to be angry with his family. And most of us probably would have told them to go find food somewhere else. But Joseph's faith in God's plan allows him to look past the sins of his brothers, committed against him, and actually be their salvation during the famine. And so what about you? What are ways that you have seen God work through tough circumstances that you found yourself in? You know, we've been talking this year about a word that helps us to look past the present circumstances and see how God is working. That word is context. And Joseph has loads of it. I mean, just see what he says in verses 8 through 13. Go ahead and read that now. Joseph doesn't blame his brothers, nor does he curse God. But he sees that God is working all along to deliver on the promises through the circumstances that led Joseph to slavery and jail. And then Joseph uses his connections and knowledge of Egypt to get his family to settle in really good land. It puts them in favor with Israel's family. That's because God can provide for us needs in any situation. You and I are pretty quick to feel blessed when good things happen. Do we have the context to see God moving in the bad times? I mean, listen to verse 8 with what Joseph says. He says, "So it was not you who sent me here, right, through slavery, but God." Take some time, maybe pause the video and think about the ways that God has provided for your material needs. Think of where you came from. Think of the home that you live in, or your food. Think about how we've taken electricity for granted until this last week. How has God used your life and your parents to provide for your material needs? Even though God has provided for him, there's still the looming brokenness between his family and him. So read Genesis 45, 14 through 28 and see what happens. You know Joseph had set up the biggest "I told you so" moment. But instead, he was overcome with emotion. He hugged his brothers and calls his father to come and live in safety and prosperity in Egypt. Even in this tough time, God can restore broken relationships. Think of all the crazy things that this family has been through. Even after getting sold into slavery and abandoned by his family, Joseph and his family restore their relationships. This is the beauty of the gospel. That the human race took God's son and killed him. But through that death, God actually restored the relationship that was broken in the Garden of Eden and in our everyday lives when you and I sin. That God is making all things new, even our relationships with others. So how does God restore people to fellowship with him? You know, this past year has been tough, physically for some, spiritually for all. And if you're like me, you felt disconnected from God in ways you really didn't expect. And coming back to him doesn't require a grand gesture. Well, at least not on our part. But God made the grand gesture and saved us through the death and resurrection of Jesus. And if God can fix the relationship between us and him, then he can restore the relationship that we've broken with others. Maybe this week, you can ask God to repair broken relationships that you may have with family members, friends, or even enemies.